Welcome to the Cooking Chat Food and Wine Podcast. Cooking Chat focuses on tasty recipes that get better with wine. On the podcast, we explore ideas for cooking with seasonal ingredients and wines to pair with them. You'll meet producers involved with the local food system, as well as winemakers and perhaps a brewer or two. This podcast continues the themes of our Cook Local, Eat Local podcast while broadening to include some other cooking chat topics of interest related to food and wine. To launch the new season, today I'm joined by Martin Redmond, who shares stories that celebrate the intersection of food, culture, and cuisine on his ENOFYLZ blog. Martin is a retired finance executive who serves as treasurer of the Glancy Wine Education Foundation. I really enjoyed talking about wine, pairings for spring, and more with Martin. On to the conversation. Hello, Martin. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey David, how are you?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to
Good.
chatting. I know occasionally I get to see you on Zooms with more people. When there's a couple every now and again we get to do a tasting webinar, but this is probably our
Yep,
first one-on-one like this.
it is. Looking forward to it.
So this will give me a chance.
I've listened to the podcast before, and I've always found it to be informative and fun. So I'm looking forward to participating.
Great. Well, let's go. I've appreciated the quality of your blog for a while, and definitely we share an interest in food and wine pairing. But I realize I don't know a lot about your backstory of how you got interested in all this. So I'd love to hear, how you got interested in wine as well as wine pairing. If it was a gradual evolution, or do you have an epiphany moment when it was something you decided you're passionate about?
It wasn't really an epiphany. Let's start with the wine journey itself. I wasn't really, and I'm going to date myself here a little bit. It really got me motivated into starting wine. I don't know if you remember or not, but there was a 60-minute segment about the French paradox. Do you remember
Oh,
that?
no, I don't.
So it was essentially 60 Minutes did this segment, and they said, "Oh, the French, they consume a lot of butter, they consume a lot of wine, yet they have better longevity than the Americans. What is the reason behind it?" And at that point, the answer was red wine.
Right, right.
And so I've always been a person who's been interested in health and taking care of myself. And so I said, oh, hey, if I can drink some red wine and that will help to contribute to my health. And so then at that point, I started drinking a little bit more wine, started with 2 Buck Chuck and worked my way up from there. Um, and I just kind of, and what really inspired me to start the blog was this. I had gone to a family reunion. And because I started my wine journey, really didn't know where to start. So I started with Karen McNeil's The Wine Bible,
Oh, yeah.
big book. Read it from page to page, from cover to cover, I should say,
Wow.
and just found it to be fascinating.
Hmm.
Shortly after I finished reading that book, I went to a family reunion, and some of my family members had questions about wine, and I was able to effortlessly answer those questions having just, read the wine Bible. And I said, you know what? If there are more questions, I think I'm going to start a blog,
Yeah.
and my family will read it at least, and it'll be a way to connect with my family and for me to express my love of wine. So fast forward to today, nobody in the family reads the blog, but
That's funny.
I don't think they do, but at any rate, but I still love wine. I still like writing about wine and wine and food pairings in particular.
Yeah.
You and I certainly share that experience in part of wine and food. So that's
Yeah.
how I got started.
Oh, that's great. That's a good story. Well, that's like good marketing, right? Like you're trying to create the content to solve a problem.
Right, right, right.
People
Exactly.
wanted that information. You knew
Right.
people are curious about it. Maybe your family got tired of it after a while, or
Yeah.
but you found other readers, so that's good. What
I
about
did
the
find other readers, yes.
Yeah. What about the cooking and the food pairing side of it? Like, did you, yeah, I'm not, when did that come into it? Or did,
That wasn't right at the beginning, but I've never really consumed a lot of wine just as a cocktail.
yeah.
So it was just natural for me to particularly after reading the Wine Bible, I think that I kind of got the notion that, um, at least in the European lifestyle, wine and food just kind of went together.
Right, right,
And much of the history of wine is very old world centric, European centric, and so we really have tried to emulate that here in the United States in many ways. And one of those ways I think is wine and food pairings.
right.
I think it can be a little too much sometimes with a lot of rules and
Hmm.
suggestions and things like that. But having said that, I've always just enjoyed having a meal and a glass of wine. And so, not too long after I got into wine, I was enjoying it with food. I didn't think about what I was doing as food and wine pairing, but I had some notions about, the classic will be pairing a Cabernet with a steak, things like that.
Right, right.
And then as my experience, I had more experience with wine and food, and I sort of expanded my attempts at either pairing wine and food or food and wine. And
Yep,
I make that subtle distinction because
yeah,
I think maybe I've shared this with you before. The difference between winos and foodies is that the winos pick the wine and decide on the food, and the
yeah,
foodies do the opposite. They pick the food, then decide on the wine.
yep.
So I fall definitely more so into picking the wine and
Okay.
then deciding what I'm going to have with it.
Yeah.
I'm certainly, I've got enough experience and I've been doing this for a long time. So if the food comes first, I'm very comfortable picking the wine to go with it. Either way.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I kind of go both ways a little bit. I maybe start with what I'm cooking first, but
Right,
and then go to the wine, but like something like we're just the my latest article was on the those Alto Adige wines and
right,
so had the wine and was trying to figure out what to pair with it. Both ways are
right.
fun, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What for you would you say makes for a great wine pairing?
One of the things I guess you can say that I think about when I'm pairing for food and wine is um, you take a sip of wine and you evaluate it if you want to. You can just simply say, hey, I like it or I don't like it.
Hmm.
And then same thing with the food. And you get a sense for, what the wine tastes like, what the food tastes like, and then you try them together.
Yep.
And if you try them together and they elevate each other, that's what makes for a food pairing, a good
Yep.
food and wine pairing. They just taste better together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good way to put it simply. Yeah, that better together. It's a good test if it's a good pairing for sure.
Right, right,
Nice. Um, so I focus on the podcast, as you know, with a lot of focus on local food and drink. It's a little hard to do in the New England area to do the
yeah,
local wine. We have a few wineries, but nothing like you. So you obviously have access to a lot of wine in your region. So
right.
if you want to talk about, do you tend to focus mostly on California wines? I mean, I know you're not exclusively, but and
Right.
are you visiting wineries in your area much? And just
I don't visit wineries as much as I used to because we have a lot of wine.
yeah,
So it seems like you can't go for a visit without buying some more wine.
right, right. That's
So,
true.
but just to give you a sense for where I am. So I um, live in Lodi, California, and Lodi, as you don't know, this is the self-proclaimed Zinfandel capital of the
Oh yeah,
world.
right.
Yeah, and we moved here we purchased a house here in 2018. In 2022, we moved here full time from the Bay Area.
Hmm.
So, I've been living in Lodi for about 3 years now. And so it's a great little wine region. I think underappreciated. It's got that sort of Zinfandel reputation, I think. And
Yep.
Zinfandel, for whatever reason, I don't, people. I don't know, this love-hate relationship with Zinfandel, I
Yeah.
think. And I think that there was a period of time when there were a lot of 17% Zinfandels, and Lodi was the epicenter for a lot of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing about wine is that it always changes, it evolves. And so you're not going to find any 17% Zinfandels nowadays, and you'll find more elegant expressions, and a lot of those are coming out of Lodi. And
Yeah.
we have probably the most old vine Zinfandel vineyards here in Lodi anywhere in the world.
Oh, really?
So there are a lot of um, and those old vines tend to produce more elegant expressions of
Hmm.
Zinfandels, lower, a little
Right.
bit lower alcohol. So anyway, I'm here in Lodi, but Lodi is in a very good location. So I'm an hour and a half from Napa, hour and a half from Sonoma,
Nice.
Livermore wine country, Sierra foothills. So it's a great location, and so we go wine tasting and go to wine events all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great. Yeah.
and the great thing about living low. They have a nice little culinary scene here. A lot of chefs who are doing, farm to table, if you will.
Oh, okay.
And the San Joaquin Valley is one of California's largest farming regions. So there's a lot of produce that's
Oh, nice.
local.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great. Which is actually a good segue to what I was going to ask about next, in terms of talking about, that we're we've been in spring for a little while. We actually had a little snow yesterday here in the Boston area. I'm guessing it did not snow in
It
Lodi
did not snow in Lodi yesterday. It was 75
yesterday.
degrees and sunny. Yes.
Nice. So do you get like how cold does it even get in the winter here? In winter there. I'm kind of wondering the extent to which, is stuff
So
being
low.
grown all year round, or is it distinctly different in terms of what's coming available in the spring there?
No, it's spring has really sprung here. We gauge it here. We have a bunch of jasmine planted out in the backyard, and once the neighbors can smell that for a couple of blocks away, then we know it's spring because the
Yeah.
jasmine has perfumed a block or two around
Oh,
us.
wow.
So that's been the case for 2, 3 weeks now.
Yep.
It does get Lodi has a reputation, rightfully so, for being hot. Last
Yeah.
year we had, I don't know, 20, 21 days it was over 100 degrees. But
Wow.
spring is very nice. Early autumn is very nice. And in the winter, it does get a little cold as relative, David. So
Yeah.
I was born in Chicago and lived there until I was 13. So it's not
Okay.
Chicago cold or Boston cold, but
Right.
it will drop down into the mid 30s sometimes
Yeah.
in the
Gotcha.
winter. Yeah.
Great. So are there things as it now spring really blossoming there in a way that's not here yet? Or are there things you really enjoy either on the eating side, or are there wines you start gravitating toward now as this spring season rolls in?
One of my favorites, and I do it, is a place that I can get it locally, and I've also done it myself. But I do asparagus is very in season now, if you will. And so I do like a good spring risotto, which would
Oh
have
yeah.
asparagus in it, maybe some spring peas, some corn, that sort of
Mm.
thing.
Yeah.
Um, so that's always a favorite this time of year. With asparagus being ready to go. Sometimes we grill it, sometimes we roast it. So we
Yeah.
enjoy it a bunch of different ways, and depending on how we prepare it, if it's in a risotto, probably we'll pair that with uh, uh, a Fino sherry or Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah.
If we are grilling and roasted then we would more so go with the red,
Yeah.
probably a Cabernet Franc,
Yeah.
maybe a Sangiovese, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a sense I do similar, I find the grilling or roasting does help with the wine pairings with asparagus.
Yes.
Do you want to share for listeners that aren't as adept or knowledgeable about sort of the food and wine, why that is that it kind of changes what wine's going to make sense when you grill or roast something like asparagus?
Yeah, it's so the I told you that I read the wine Bible from cover to cover. So there are also two wine pairing books that I read from cover to cover.
Okay.
One of them is called Taste Buds and Molecules by a guy named Chartier. The other is by Evan Goldstein, who's a master sommelier. He wrote a book called Perfect Pairings.
Yep.
And in that book, he talks about high impact, low impact cooking methods.
Hmm.
And so once you take a nice firm piece of asparagus and you have a low impact, maybe you put in some risotto or you boil it or steam it. that's a low impact method. So it's going to keep its natural character. It's going to have
Right.
those green sort of herbal flavors.
Yep.
But once you subject it to a high impact roasting or grilling, then it changes the nature of it.
Hmm.
Um, and it makes the vegetable, in the case of asparagus, sweeter or changes the nature of it. You get those charred notes, and so that's what makes it more compatible with a red wine because it's got some char on it, or the high impact method, maybe roasting, has changed the nature of the vegetable. Same thing with mushrooms or other vegetables.
Yep. That's a good way to break it down. You've really done your homework on this stuff, huh?
I have, I really enjoyed those two books, and they were very, very educational and gave me some things to think about I hadn't thought about before. And
Yeah.
so, the wine and food pairing is something I've always enjoyed. So, like anything else, you can go into the deep end of it if you want to, and I
Right.
chose to do
Right.
that. Yeah.
And speaking of the learning aspect of it, I noticed you've got several certifications. One of them had was related to sherry. That I found that interesting. You actually got certified
Yeah.
in.
My sherry journey is interesting because years ago I was in a tasting group when we lived in the Bay Area, and we tasted a lot of different wines. And one of the things we had was sherry, and I really didn't know a lot about it. And the guy who was leading the group said, sherry is actually one of the world's most versatile wines for wine and food pairing. And I remembered from the wine Bible. Um, she talked about the versatility of, Fino sherry and other types of sherry. Same thing, and the guy who wrote Taste Buds and Molecules, he talked about it quite a bit. And the premise of that book is that there are molecules in food and wine that, if they're the same or complementary, help to make that pairing.
Yep.
And so I became a fan of sherry, particularly Fino sherries and manzanillas, biological sherries, those are called. And, David, my experience has been that, those are, again, some of the most food-friendly wines you can find.
Interesting.
You take something like asparagus, which is hard to prepare, hard to pair if it's, kind of raw or steamed. And Fino sherry will pair very well with that. So that's how I kind of got into sherry. And I just, it's very versatile. I would definitely say, and I must acknowledge, it's an acquired taste. It doesn't
Yep.
taste like the wine that we're accustomed to because it's exposed to oxygen in different forms. But once you get that taste and you acquire it, then it's hard to go back.
Yeah.
I always have some sherry
Mm.
here in the house, and there are a few things that, if I'm not sure what to do, and sometimes I'm not sure what to pair with food, a Fino sherry would be one, sparkling wine would be one,
Yep.
Riesling, Pinot Noir. Those are things that are all Swiss knife wines.
Yeah. Right. Right.
They'll go with a lot of different things. So you don't have and you're not always looking for a perfect pairing.
Sure.
I frequently have pairings where, essentially, what's the phrase that I like to use? Slipping my mind right now. Where, the food and the wine go well together. Peaceful coexistence is what
Oh,
I
okay.
call
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, peaceful
Right.
coexistence.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of peaceful coexistence, and that's fine.
Yeah.
You're not always looking for something that's going to shake your world every night, and peaceful
Right.
coexistence is just fine. Yep.
Because then you wouldn't appreciate it when it really sings.
Exactly, exactly. You got it.
So speaking of which, any recent pairings you've had that really kind of wowed you or said, wow, these really elevate each other as using that term earlier?
Like you, I was on the Alto Adige webinar, and
Yep.
there were two Legrand wines. The second was their reserve wine. I paired
Yes.
that with a a gnocchi with
Mm.
braised lamb. It was
Ooh.
fantastic.
Oh,
That
that
was
sounds.
really, and literally you tried the lamb, the gnocchi with the lamb, so good, so tender. You tried
Yep.
the wine, you tried them together. It's like, wow. It's almost like the taking a sip of having a little bit of the gnocchi and the lamb, take a little sip of wine. It made the food taste a little sweeter, the wine tasted better. Just a
Yeah.
fantastic pairing. Yeah.
Ooh, that sounds great. I had that same one. I had saved that. That was the one I didn't open when we were doing the webinar. I kind
Right.
of saved that because I was like, "Oh, I want to cook something good for it." But then the event was coming up this week, and I'm like, dang, I just got to open it with something that I'm
Right.
cooking this week. And it wound
What
up
do you
not
do with
being.
it?
I cooked it with, there's a New York Times cooking recipe that I like with ch braised chicken and lentils. Very good recipe, but it
Ooh.
definitely had some spice, like turmeric and cumin. Peaceful
Yeah.
coexistence would be a way to put it. It wasn't terrible, but
Right.
I actually had some like Sicilian red wines that were a little lighter that went better with that same dish. I've made
Right.
it a few
That
times.
spice. Yeah.
But it was fine, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
better with cheese. I had a cheese plate with it as well, and with some prosciutto. You talk about Swiss Army knife wines. I think prosciutto, I think, is the opposite for. I don't know. I've found a wine that doesn't taste pretty good with prosciutto.
For sure. Yeah. I would tend to agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I know another thing I want to touch base on. You've mentioned a few times about an organization you're involved with to promote greater diversity in the wine industry. I don't know if you want to share a little bit about what that organization is and what its mission is.
Sure. Um, so I am the treasurer for the Glancy Wine Education Foundation. I've been the treasurer for 3 years now. The organization was started, I believe, in 2020.
Yep.
It was named for a gentleman named David Glancy, who is a master sommelier and also a certified wine educator. So he's one of, I don't know, maybe 12, 15 of those people in the world.
Wow.
So anyway, our mission really is to provide scholarships to underserved communities to further their wine education, and in doing so, to increase their earning capacity and diversity in wine.
Yeah.
As you know, wine, not necessarily a really super diverse if you go to a tasting room, less so in California than probably other places,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily the most diverse place. And it was a good fit for me. I retired in 21,
Yep.
and I was looking for, something to do, and I love wine, and this is a an organization that helps to, like I said, literally we provide scholarships to people typically in the hospitality community
Yeah.
who are looking to further their wine education and increase their earning potential. So that's how I got into it. That's what the organization does.
Yeah. That's great. And I'm sure having that scholarship, motivate both makes it possible and might also put the idea in people's head if they hear about this scholarship that, hey, I could
Exactly.
advance my career here with this
Exactly. And we've got a
opportunity.
lot of success stories about people who maybe they were a server or even maybe a busboy at a restaurant and kind of got into wine and, took some classes. And next thing you know, maybe a year or two later, they're a sommelier. So,
Yeah.
it can really change somebody's life and their earning potential.
Yeah. That's great. Wonderful. So we have covered some recent wine pairings. The one you had recently, any others that are just like either memorable or a favorite wine pairing, maybe that you go to again and again?
A wine pairing that I love, that I go to again and again, I try to have a healthy diet. And so we
Yeah.
do a fair amount of mushroom risotto.
Oh yeah.
Because it's a dish that I love, and my wife not as much, but
Okay.
we make it anyway.
Yeah.
And so typically we'll have that with a nice Pinot Noir, but it's also good with Barolo,
Oh
Italian
yeah.
wines,
Yep.
so those sorts of things. So I do really enjoy those. So that's one that I would go to frequently. From time
Yeah.
we don't eat as much, consume as much meat as we used to, like
Yeah.
kind of smaller portions or less
Right.
frequently. And but certainly, a good steak or some lamb with a cab is, that's always a winner.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't know if you find this, and maybe you have ideas. The mushroom risotto would be a good example of something that doesn't have meat or much meat, and it goes well with red wine. Are there any other things you've found that you in line with that healthy healthier eating that where you can, if you like that red wine. I know some people struggle with that a little.
Yeah, that's the one that's top of mind. Again, if you take raw vegetables and you are grilling them, then that
Yeah.
again takes it in a different direction. So if
Right.
you were to um, grill some asparagus or maybe some other green vegetables, and that would make it good. Something like chili without meat, I think,
Oh yeah.
could also go
Yeah.
with red wine. It's tomato based, tomato sauce based.
Right. Yeah.
So that's one where, sometimes you can just leave meat out of things. You can leave
Yeah.
meat out of the spaghetti.
Right. Right.
And it's still going to go well with the red wine because of the tomato based sauce.
Yeah. That's a good point. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Good. Well, I know this has been a great way to learn more about some of your background, and I always like chatting food and wine with you. I know you're active on social. I see, and actually, I've noticed. I don't know how long you've been doing it for. You highlight the wine of the week. I'm always interested to
Oh
uh,
yeah,
see
I
what you.
started doing that late last year. Actually, been doing pretty good. So other than vacation, we went to the Philippines and Thailand in February. I didn't do it then, but other than
Yeah,
that, I've been doing a pretty good job of it. And I just wanted to, social's funny because you can certainly become a slave to it. I don't want to be a slave to social. But
yeah,
having said that, I can certainly to commit to a wine a week, and I'm on
right.
social and following people and commenting and liking and just consuming the stuff. But um, I just had to be realistic with myself. I'm not a person who's going to post a wine 4 or 5 times a week
Yeah,
on
yeah,
social. Some
yeah,
people have the bandwidth to do that or the desire to do it. I'm not one of those people. So
yeah,
anyway, I figured I could do a wine a week, and we consume typically 3 or 4 bottles a week,
yeah,
and typically I'm looking for something a little different.
yeah.
This week's wine of the week, for example, is I'm featuring my first skin fermented wine. It's a Trousseau Gris,
Oh, okay.
low alcohol, 12.2% alcohol. And those are the wines that I'm enjoying a little bit more these days than some of the 16, 15%
Yeah,
more traditional wines. And there's just so much of that here, kind of locally.
right, right.
Sonoma, Napa, Lodi. You can find the smaller winemakers will be producing those types of wines, quote unquote, natural wines that are below 13% alcohol. And so there are a lot of those, and we enjoy
Yeah,
those. So that's
nice.
what I'll be highlighting this week.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, I'll check it out. And so where can people find you on social and you want to give your website address so people can
Okay, yeah.
there?
I am at ENOFYLZ Wine Blog. Now, the ENOFYLZ is a little, I try to be cute with it, but maybe it didn't turn out so well. It's ENOFYLZ, ENOFYLZ, and an enophile is a wine lover.
Yeah.
Wineblog.com. And in social, it's just my name, Martin D. Redmond. And that's on, Instagram, Twitter,
Yeah.
Threads, Blue Sky.
All right, cool. Well, great. It's been great chatting food and wine with you, Martin, and I encourage people to check
Likewise,
out
David.
the blog and your stuff on social. Cheers.
Likewise, David, and I appreciate reaching out to me and the chat, and had a good time.
Yeah, me too. Great.
All right, man.
See ya.
Take care of yourself. I'll see
You too.
ya. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Cook Local, Eat Local. To get the show notes with links for recipes and resources we covered today, go to cooklocaleatlocal.com to get the podcast landing page. And please be sure to subscribe to Cook Local, Eat Local wherever you get your podcasts. Make it a great day with some tasty local food on your plate.